If you could, join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to take roll call now if I can. At this time, a vote shall be taken to excuse members unable to attend due to extenuating circumstances.
I'll motion that.
Motion that?
Yes.
I motion. Estelle? Estelle?
Can our board member on the phone hear us?
Here.
Here, okay. We have 3 board members present, which, all in favor?
Aye.
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 We do establish a quorum. Okay, I'd like to go on to the next order of business, which is approving the minutes from the last meeting. I'd like to approve the draft minutes of the board adjustment meeting held on January 24th, 2017. Do I hear a motion?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Minutes have been approved, and
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, because this board meets on an infrequent basis, if you could all introduce yourselves on the dais so our guests in the audience know who's who and whose role is what, that would be helpful.
thank you.
Robert Garcia. Board member.
Tom Neath, Chair.
Gary Verberg, Special Counsel to the Board.
Thank you.
And Estelle.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, yes. And it's our board member, Estelle, is unavailable to be with us in person. She does have all of the materials, the same as the rest of the board that we provided her, the same agenda packet that was posted online and provided to you all as the board. And but she is on the phone and participating in the hearing, and because of that, she does constitute a quorum.
Correct. Thank you. I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, citizens' comments. Now is the time for citizens who would like to address the board on non-agenda items. Are there any speaker cards? Okay. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak on a non-agenda item? So there's no. Just good. Open. Yep. Old business?
None.
No? None. Okay, and then we move on to the next agenda item, which is new business.
Yes, members of the board and members of the audience, the chairman has asked me to give you sort of a brief summary of what it is that's before them today and the role they're playing. The action that's being considered today is an appeal from the zoning administrator's decision relating to the spacing or distance requirements between assisted living facilities. It is the zoning administrator's interpretation that the property in question does not meet the requirements of the spacing or distance requirements. And that is what the sole issue is before the board here today. The board acts in what's called a quasi-judicial capacity. That's really like them being like judges. And really what they're here to decide today is the legal issue of the interpretation of the zoning code and how it applies factually to the circumstance. This hearing today is not about a variance, and it is not about the policy of whether assisted living homes are desirable or wanted in this neighborhood. Those are policy decisions that are made by different boards, but the Board of Adjustments hears appeals of interpretations by the zoning administrator, and that is the sole issue really before the board today, is how to measure the distance requirements for spacing between assisted living facilities.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would suggest you let the applicant come forth and present their case.
Thank you. The applicant? Please.
Yep, Mr. Breedlove, if you would, just stand at the podium and state your name and address for the record, and if you would just speak into the microphone, please. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Crawford Breedlove. I'm the CEO of Arizona Behavioral Care Homes. Our business address is 4645. You asked for the address? 4645 South Lakeshore Drive in Tempe, Arizona. That was actually really well said. I didn't know what to expect coming here today. This is actually kind of exciting. I haven't been in one of these for a while, since I was in social work school when we were protesting. But what I'm coming today is just to talk about the materials that we were able to use to make our best judgment to purchase a house in a neighborhood with the intention to use it for like a residential treatment facility. So I don't know, I brought a couple things to talk about, and I'd like to show you. I don't know what you have available. I did submit a packet of materials that involve like the zoning map and some other things that I'd like to discuss. So if you have that in front of you, I brought one. If you'd like everyone here to see one, I've got it on there too if you'd like. But
Yeah, I will come help you with the AV so it can be projected onto the screen, but if I may, Mr. Chairman, they do have the complete package that you submitted with your application. The board does. And the yellow tint will go away. Oh, it will? Yeah, okay. Laney, can you adjust the yellow tint on the Elmo?
sure.
I
So
can't, but you
I
can
guess
turn the light
position
on
of
to the
argument
projector and that
I'm
will take
making
care of
here
it.
is that the way that the properties are measured, because I get the quarter-mile distance, and this will be our 6th location in Goodyear. And even if this doesn't go the way I'd like it to today, we're still going to open that facility up as a 6-bed property, and we intend to continue to do more business in Goodyear because we have a really good relationship with the employment body and the people that we employ here, the police. Like, they're extremely progressive in working with folks that we provide services to. And so regardless, I'd just like to state that there's no animosity here. This, I think, was pretty much as I experienced it, a misunderstanding and just confusion. And but we intend to continue to do business in the city of Goodyear regardless of how this goes, because we like doing business here. So the argument that we're making is that the materials that are used and the language that's used in the statutes implies that the properties are measured from the actual house to the actual house, or the facility to the facility. So one of the first things that we do whenever we're looking for new properties, we go on the City of Goodyear Group Home Buffer Zone map, and we look for properties. And so up until this point, because this is the first time we've actually encountered this problem, but we've got a couple of houses that are very, very close to one another, but it was never challenged. But if you look at, there's a few properties here, like this one here and this one here. If you notice all the locations, now what this represents is 10-bed facilities, and that's how the rule applies. And so each facility is represented by a little home icon with a dot in the center of the property, and then a circumference circle of a quarter mile around it. And so looking at the map, you've got especially here and here, you've got buffer zones that run right through the middle of the icon itself of the house. And so the way that we've interpreted up until now was that it was the home to the home has to be a quarter mile from, in distance. And it kind of made sense too when I was thinking about it, if you had a property with like several acres, but the property line up at the front of your property was, under a quarter mile, but then you have a house another half mile back onto your property, you wouldn't be able to use the property to do business because of the position we're against is that it's property line to property line. The statutes themselves, when referencing assisted living and group homes, it's all kind of bunched in together, it refers to the distance and says specifically a minimum separation distance of 20 feet, 1/4 mile for all assisted living homes with greater than 6 residents has to be done. Now, at no point, now going through the statutes when it references assisted living in this particular statute or any other statute that it's listed, it never states specifically how you would measure that distance. It just references this kind of general distance, this 1/4 mile, that has to be between, but it doesn't state how it's measured. And so when we initially bought this property and went through the process where we got the initial denial letter, we were given this, which is, this came along with the denial, letter, and it said that the existing site, isn't 1,320 feet away. And it says here, a copy of the city map showing the existing site with a buffer that overlaps the proposed site is attached. And there's no details about how it's measured or anything like that. And again, the map looks the same. You've got a dot here that represents with a star in the middle on top of the home. And then you've got a buffer circle here that shows a 1/4 mile running through the middle of this home. So this map looks very similar to how it's done this map. And it's referencing that it doesn't quite meet the distance. But there is no distance. It's not saying how far it is. It's just showing essentially what I see here on a bigger version, that there's a home with an asterisk in the middle of it, and then the circumference line that runs right through the home, and there's two examples of that right here. And so when I was interacting with the zoning folks, they said, yeah, you got to get like a surveyor to go out and measure the distance between the properties. And so I used not only my own Google Maps, I just put in the property addresses, and it came up with 1320.19 feet. But I had a professional surveyor come out and measure just like I gave him a copy of this, and I said, measure from property to property, just like you see it here, and he did. And unfortunately, I didn't get in contact with the woman that owns the other house, and so she was kind of upset, wondering what he was doing out there, with a device measuring and stuff. But he came up with 1,352 feet, which gives us a little over 20 extra feet measured. And so I guess just in a nutshell, I guess what I'm appealing is not only that how it's measured, but also too, when I submitted this, the zoning folks said they met with an attorney for the county or for the city, and he provided essentially a ruling. He was like, well, no, we do things property line to property line, and it was pretty quick. It was pretty matter of fact, and I didn't think it was fair, because it's not anywhere in the rules. It's not doing my due diligence. It's not anywhere in the materials that I have access to or anything that I would be able to use. The materials aren't specific to how it's measured, and using the graphics, it's very easy to assume that you measure from house to house, not nearest property line to nearest property line. And so that's about it.
Discussion? Questions? Oh, I have no questions at this time.
I totally understand you. Do you have any questions?
Does the board member on the phone, Estelle, do you have any questions of Mr. Breedlove?
I do have a question. Can you hear me? I have to.
Absolutely, I can hear you.
You can hear me? How many do he anticipate in this house? How many in the group do he anticipate to? be in the location. Did you hear that question?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. We're going to get licensed for 10.
License for 10. And you don't anticipate any more than 10?
Oh, no, ma'am. We're in a residential setting. You can't do more than 10. If you did more than 10, you'd have to get commercially licensed.
Okay. Okay, so you can only do 10. That's about all of, that's the only question I wanted to ask, because if you're moving into a residential place, I'm sure they want to know how many extra bodies are going to be there, in and out, in and out.
Yeah, there'll be 10 residents total.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Estelle.
You're welcome.
Otto?
Mr. Chairman, just as the order of business goes here, so the applicant made a presentation, staff will make a presentation, and then I believe you're going to let the applicant speak again. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. Good evening. My name is Christopher Baker. I'm the Development Services Director. The Planning and Zoning Division works in the Development Services Department, and so I'm here representing the Planning and Zoning Division tonight. One of my titles is also the Zoning Administrator, so that's why I'm here before you tonight, to outline the history of the case thus far, and how we arrived at, how the city and myself arrived at the decision that's before you tonight. And then, of course, we'll be available to answer any questions that you may have as well. Okay? So, as Mr. Breedlove had indicated, the property that's in question is located at 4349 North 161st Avenue. And the request that you're considering tonight is the appeal of the zoning administrator, which is the decision of the Planning and Zoning Department. As Mr. Breedlove indicated, when there's a group home or an assisted living home that has between 7 and 10 residents, there's a separation distance requirement that's imposed by the City of Goodyear zoning ordinance. And that separation distance is 1,320 feet. As Mr. Breedlove indicated, we have a difference of opinion in regards to the measurement. Mr. Breedlove indicated that the fact that the ordinance is silent on the exact methodology used to make that determination of the separation distance, and he is correct, the ordinance is silent on that, as we pointed out to you in our staff report. So Mr. Breedlove also indicated that group home or assisted living facilities that have 6 or less residents do not have to meet that requirement, that separation requirement, and that is a factual statement as well. So if a group home or assisted living facility wanted to open up with 6 or less, that separation distance would not, in fact, apply. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that, as Mr. Breedlove had indicated. So the question before you tonight is the measurement. The separation distance, as I indicated, is 1,320 feet. And so how did we arrive at measuring from property line to property line? Tonight, the Board of Adjustments tonight has a decision to make. You can affirm the decision of the zoning administrator, which will have the effect of continuing to measure the separation distance of these type of uses from property line to property line. You can reverse the decision of the zoning administrator, which would have the effect of measuring from door to door, as Mr. Breedlove has indicated. As a matter of fact, on that survey he showed, can I borrow your survey sheet?
Absolutely. This one?
No, the one from
You'll notice that on this letter that Mr. Breedlove had a surveyor prepare, it does measure from door to door, and that's how you arrive at a number that's greater than that 1320 feet. Because when we measure it, it's from property line to property line, so things are a little bit closer.
Sure, sure.
So if you all affirm the decision of the zoning administrator tonight, the outcome of that would mean that the proposed group home that Mr. Breedlove is desiring to open would be too close to the other existing group home and therefore would not be allowed to have 7 to 10 residents. If you reversed the decision of the zoning administrator tonight, then as Mr. Breedlove indicated, he could in fact open a home which would have 6 or fewer residents associated with it. So it's purely this number of 7 to 10 or 6 to less and how we measure that distance. I just want to make sure that's clear for everybody. So just let me outline a little bit of the history for you. On February 3rd of 2017, the application for an assisted living facility, or assisted living home zoning clearance letter was made by Mr. Breedlove's organization. The city staff reviewed that application in accordance with the city zoning ordinances. I won't get into the specifics. You have all of those citations and so forth in the packet that was provided to you. We found that the proposed group home was within the 1,320 feet of the already existing group home, which is located at 16195 West Glen Rosa. Therefore, since it was too close, it was, didn't meet that separation requirement. As Mr. Breedlove indicated, we did provide him a letter of denial because it didn't meet the requirements of the ordinance. We advised Mr. Breedlove that he could, in fact, provide a survey that could show us, from a licensed surveyor, that could show us the exact measurements, which he did. But his measurements are going from door to door, not property line to property line, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. We also advised him that he could, in fact, make a special use permit application that would be a full-on public hearing process that would go from Planning Commission all the way through to City Council. And so, but Mr. Breedlove chose to come to the Board of Adjustment, so that's how we're here this evening. With regard to the specific requirements of the ordinance, as I mentioned, a group home of 7 to 10 does have a separation distance of 1320, and we found that that these two properties are closer than that, the property that's proposed and the existing facility. Group homes provide an opportunity for people who need assistance to live in a neighborhood setting, and the Goodyear zoning ordinance makes that accommodation in accordance with the fair housing law and also other state regulations. So we are providing a reasonable accommodation for group homes within a residential setting and conformance with the applicable law. Group homes with 1 to 6 residents fall under the definition of a family, and therefore they're not regulated differently, meaning they don't have that separation requirement. Group homes that have 7 to 10, because they can have a larger impact to the residential setting of a single-family neighborhood, are regulated and have that separation distance. There is, as I mentioned, there is no standard or definition clearly stated in the zoning ordinance that states how the separation measurement for group homes is taken, meaning do we do it from property line to property line or door to door. However, it is the standard practice of cities throughout the valley and frankly across the country to measure distances for zoning purposes, to give notice to property owners and to give notice of zoning actions on a property line to property line basis. As a matter of fact, the city of Avondale, the city of Buckeye, all measure zoning notifications from property line to property line, not structure to structure. Additionally, the use that's being provided by, or proposed, by Mr. Breedlove, once it's approved, it covers the entire lot that he and his organization own. So it's just not approving it for that individual structure. If they wanted to add on to the house, they could add on to the house. Conversely, the residents of the home would also have the ability to use the yard, the back have full benefit of utilizing the entire lot. They can go in the front yard, backyard, side yards, things of that nature, driveway. So really, the use of the facility is the entire lot, not just the individual structure. So that also is another rationale of why we measure from property line to property line. Additionally, the city does not maintain an as-built survey of every residential single-family home in the city of Goodyear. It's impractical for us to do that at this particular time. It would be an undue burden on homeowners to have to provide us as-built surveys after they construct a home. So it's something that we find simply unreasonable at this point in time to have as-built surveys of individual homes. Because we don't have that information, we're not able to measure from structure to structure or door to door, building to building. What we do have, however, is a GIS database that the city works with Maricopa County on that measures property line to property line off recorded subdivision plats. Or, excuse me, that provides where property lines are from recorded subdivision plats. So it is functionally more efficient for cities and jurisdictions, not only in the valley, but throughout the country, to measure from property line to property line as opposed to structure to structure. Additionally, it is the opinion of the zoning administrator that the interpretation of measuring from property line to property line is in conformance with ARS, Arizona Revised Statutes. I won't get into all the particulars, but Title 9, Chapter 4, which uses language for zoning in giving notice to property owners, not the owners of individual structures. As Mr. Breedlove actually pointed out earlier, a structure could be situated on a lot and be beyond the notification area, but the property could be in that notification area. So therefore, that person should receive notice of a zoning action. And so because of that, we're applying that same methodology that the state requires the city to do in giving actions or a public notice of zoning actions from property to property, like property to property. We're applying that same methodology in this measurement instance as well for Mr. Breedlove's application. We also find that the practice of measuring from property line to property line is in conformance with our own city regulations and zoning, meaning how we give notice for public zoning actions as well. It goes from property owner, property to property, not structure to structure. So in conclusion, we find that the methodology that we applied in this particular case is in conformance with the methodology applied by this, that state law requests us to do for zoning action notification, property owner to property owner. We also find that the use of the assisted living group home applies to the entire lot, not just the structure. And we also find that we've measured it in conformance with what our zoning ordinance requires and what is practical and available for the city. So I hope that is clear and I communicated effectively. If not, please feel free to ask me any questions.
This is Robert. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is there any way for a business person who has an interest in a lot in Goodyear to come to that conclusion because it's not stated in the code?
The way in which an owner would come to that conclusion would be through consultation with staff and making the application, which is what Mr. Breedlove did. And then we made the determination that it's property line to property line. So although it is unclear, we stand by that methodology currently, and that's the methodology. We consider this essentially precedence, and that's how we'll be doing it in the future. So I hope that answers your question.
So he would have the ability to come to that same conclusion by visiting the City of Goodyear, and they would instruct him. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Let me see if I have okay.
Estelle, do you have any questions?
Yes, if this is going by property line, I want to ask Mr. Breedlove, does he really have to have 7 to 10? Why can't he have 6 to 7?
Any questions for staff before we turn it back over to Mr. Breedlove?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Do you have any questions of me?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to turn it back over to applicant.
Man, he did that way better than I did it. So there just a few things. One, and this kind of speaks on the question you had. When I interacted with the,
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, point of order. Mr. Breedlove, can you go to the podium, please? Because we do audio tape and videotape all of our meetings, so just for public record. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but thank you.
oh, no, that's fine. When I interacted with that department, with the zoning folks, they weren't able to give me an answer on how they measure. Now, I know, like, based on the presentation, it seems like, just as I experienced it, is a little oversimplified, that, like, it was implied that it's just common knowledge. Everybody knows that we measure property line to property line. But I don't work, in zoning for the City of Goodyear. It's not my area of expertise. And I know that, like, when talking about measuring distances between other businesses or trying to zone other forms of business, they do measure the buildings rather than the property lines. And so when I interacted with, to kind of speak on that question you asked him, when I interacted with that department, they weren't actually able to tell me a definitive answer of how it's measured. And that's why they had to confer with the attorney. And so the email that I have in the response I got was, we spoke to the city attorney, and the required 1/4 mile separation from two sites is property line to property line. And so, I guess what I would challenge is, without actually disagreeing, that property line that makes sense in so many capacities, but that department didn't know the answer. It wasn't as such common knowledge as it was presented, when the folks that work there didn't know that, didn't present that. They had to confer with an attorney for more of a, like, kind of CYA kind of approach to it before they gave me an answer on it, basically. I guess, and the second thing I want to say is, I'm not necessarily challenging or trying to challenge the City of Goodyear's ways of doing things or trying to change how they approach something. I guess what I'm asking more or less is to acknowledge that, given the information and everything that's available to me as a business person outside trying to do business in Goodyear, and doing my due diligence and interacting with this department and other departments, that it isn't simple, and it wasn't easy to just come to the determination that it's measured property line to property line. And so, using my best judgment, I feel like I participated and did my part in the relationship and trying to get this task accomplished. I guess what I'm looking for is to acknowledge that if the rule is going to be property line to property line, that it's stated in the statutes and in the rules, so that information is available to all people involved, so that something like this doesn't happen again. Because it seems like with paying close attention, I was able to fall through a somewhat large crack in that system. So I'm not looking to change the rules. I'm just looking to make the rules known to all parties, involved. That's it.
Thank you. I had a question for you.
Sure.
Is this, you have item number 4 in the packet. Looks like it's a letter from the City of Goodyear. Is this the only letter that the city sent you?
The only letter that I got was the one dated February 17th,
Yes,
and it was accompanied with this.
right.
That's it.
That's the only one you got?
That's it. From that point on, it was just me inquiring about what's the next step, in an attempt to get in front of, I guess, you guys.
Thank you.
I think the woman on the phone had a question about.
Yes.
Do you have a question about why the utilization number?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Well, so I'll answer your question, even though I'm kind of hesitant to do so because I don't see its direct correlation with the zoning rule. But
Well, perhaps I misunderstood. It seems as though if you had 6 or 7, you wouldn't have you would be within the jurisdiction of what the code states. But
Oh,
if
sure.
you're going for 7 to 10, then you have to abide by the code of
Right. Okay,
Goodyear.
yeah, okay. So the house that we bought was roughly $400,000 and some change, with the intention of it being a 10-bed house because the house is so large and it has a basement. And the population that we intend to work with are folks that are aging in place, the older adults that we can provide personal care to. And so right now it's a pretty underserved population with the baby boomer aging pyramid turning upside down. There's a lot more older adults in need of residential treatment and personal care services, and we're kind of on the front of the spear on that one. And so we're trying to move as quickly as possible to meet that need before too many folks end up in skilled nursing or facilities or hospitals inappropriately.
Does that answer your question, Estelle?
Yes, it does. I believe he's talking about what, senior citizens?
Yes,
That's why I
ma'am.
kept quiet.
Yes, ma'am. But it's
Yes, okay.
yes,
I have one question for you, sir.
sure.
You have 5 other businesses within the community. You've been working with Goodyear for some time now. What measurements did you take, or what procedures did you use to validate the distance between those facilities?
Okay, so the way that we would normally go about it up until this point, we'd get the buffer zone map offline, we'd get the addresses. None of them are close enough to look too scary, but we'd find the address, we'd look at it on a buffer zone map, and then we would call essentially one of the folks that works up front, one of the ladies that works up front, and we'd say, hey, we're looking at this property. The 2 owners of the company that I run are fairly, they're they're charismatic, kind of really tall guys. Like, you can't forget them once you see them. They're like weirdly tall, and so we would call up there and say, hey, here's the property we're looking at. We want to make a move on it. How does it look? And they would look it up for us, and they would say, yeah, it looks good, or no, you should, whatever. But Goodyear also doesn't have like a ton of pre-existing facilities in it, and so the distance part hasn't been an issue to this point, like just looking at it on the map. And even looking at it on this map, when you put a dot like on that zone map of where the house is located, it doesn't even fall within the circumference line. And so, but that's about, I guess, the scale of the map being used, but that's it. And so they would look it up. And then so we would typically supply our zoning application along with our, the beginning of the occupancy license process all at the same time.
And did you at any of the other properties have anybody do the measurement for you?
No. Mm-mm. No.
I have no further questions at this time. Roger? Anything? Okay. We do have a speaker from the audience that would like to address the board. Robert Buchanan.
Mr. Chairman, just for the benefit of the crowd, the city's policy is to allow public speakers for 3 minutes. So you'll have 3 minutes to speak your piece, and Ms. Harris here will be timing you, so we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, my name's Robert Buchanan. I live at 4330 North 161st Avenue, which is where the residence is proposed. I was hoping to come here to give my opinion on whether it should actually be a behavioral home in our neighborhood, because I'm totally against that. But it doesn't sound like that's what we're looking at for here. So just want to go on record to say that I am opposed to having that house in our neighborhood. I don't think it's a good idea. It's a residential neighborhood. It's got kids that play around in there, and it's not an area that I think we should have a home like this. So I'll go that on record and saying that, and that's my piece. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Mr. Chairman, if I can add one other thing, I'm sorry. Just for the benefit of the residents and the board, Mr. Buchanan did send in an email to staff, which was also included in your packet. So that if you are in fact the same Mr. Buchanan, I just want to make you aware that they do have the information you sent. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Do we have any additional discussions on the subject?
Mr. Chair, at this time, it's really up to the board to have a discussion if they choose to have one. If they think they need to get legal advice, you can go into executive session, or you can ask me questions publicly. You can do it either way. But if you want legal advice, you can go into executive session. If you don't think you need legal advice, it's now on the floor for you to discuss and make a decision upon.
Estelle?
Excuse me, as a point of clarification, this is an item that in order to carry the vote one way or the other, either to affirm the zoning administrator's decision or to reverse it, it requires a majority of the board members, so that's 3 votes. It has to be, so if there's a split in the vote, there's no decision.
Estelle?
Yes, is there any way we could go into executive session?
Yes. You can do that.
So,
Motion
just
that.
need a motion and second for that, and a vote of the board to do so.
Okay.
I'd like to motion that we move to executive session right at the moment.
Section. I'll second that.
Call for a vote.
Aye.
All
Aye.
in favor?
Aye in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we,
And just for our interested citizens here, what we'll do, because we have one board member on the phone, is Laney will disconnect this. The board will, and the board attorney will call our board member that's on the phone from the exec room. And then
Okay.
when you are done with that, hang up on that call, and then we'll reestablish that phone call connection for this room,
Okay.
and then go back into session.
Okay, very
and we'd like to take a vote on the decision.
So, Mr. Chairman, what you would do is call the question and ask for a motion, a second, and then the procedure would be if any other, if the board members have any discussion amongst themselves, and then there would be we'll do a roll call vote. Okay?
Okay, I think I got that.
We'll help. We'll continue to help you. It's okay.
Okay, so we're taking a roll call again?
You need a motion.
Chair, I would entertain a request for a motion.
Yes.
Thank you. I motion for,
There's 2 options, to either
excuse me.
affirm the decision of the zoning administrator or to reverse the decision of the zoning administrator. Those are the 2 options. So someone needs to make a motion to do one or the other.
I make a motion to affirm the decision of the zoning commission.
I'll second that motion. And do roll call. All in favor?
Now it's appropriate for any discussion of the board, if they choose to have some discussion.
I have nothing to add.
Estelle?
I have nothing to add.
So roll call vote.
Roll call vote?
Aye.
So that would be Board Member Garcia.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye. And Board Member Estelle?
Aye.
Let the record show that we do have a quorum and that we've agreed on the affirm the decision of the zoning administration.
Yes. So, Mr. Chairman, the next item on the agenda would be number 8. Any informational items? So if you would like to move us to number 8.
Are there any informational items?
No, sir.
No.
And at this point, I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second Robert Garcia.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is adjourned, our session is adjourned. Thank you.